the day Cameron and I got engaged. His childhood sweetheart jumped into the sea. She left a message online, if you want to marry her, then your punishment will be to lose me forever. Facing the media, Cameron held my hand, smiling gently. I have nothing to do with her. I will always love my wife. I was overjoyed, looking forward to our future together. However, 3 days later, Professor Cameron, who was always so composed and disciplined, committed suicide out of love. Chapter 1. The day Cameron and I got engaged. The famous dancer Julia leaped off a towering cliff. She left Cameron a letter. If you want to marry her, then your punishment will be to lose me forever. The letter was anonymously posted online, causing a huge stir across the internet. Netizens dug into Julia's past overnight. They discovered that during her brief but brilliant life, there had always been a man who loved her deeply, to the point of pain. Ultimately, the two missed out on each other due to the gap between their social classes. That man was very likely my fiancé, Cameron. Cameron heard the news just as he was about to place the engagement ring on my finger. The media swarmed in, crashing into the engagement venue. Their questions were sharp and direct. Professor Mu, have you seen Ms. Julia Jin's final words? Do you know Ms. Jean? What's your relationship? Flashes flickered incessantly. Cameras trained on Cameron. They all wanted to find a trace of emotion on the face of this renowned physics professor. Cameron, however, calmly said, I saw it. I have nothing to do with her. The reporters pressed on. But people online are saying that you and Ms. Jean were lovers, that your romance was straight out of a political drama brought to life. What do you have to say about that? I anxiously clenched my hands. I had been by Cameron's side for the past 10 years. I had finally waited for his confession. How could such a ridiculous situation occur? I found it utterly absurd. I stepped in front of the cameras, smiling as I said, we don't know any Julia. Cameron and I have been together for 10 years. Today, we're getting engaged. So please stop speculating. After speaking, I looked up, full of hope, waiting for Cameron's response. Cameron lowered his gaze, his eyes deep and calm. That's right. I'm getting married. He tightly held my ring finger, slowly sliding the ring onto it. In front of all the media, he kissed my forehead, his once cold and stern features filled with tenderness. Natalie, after tonight, your wish will come true. At the time, I believed that after years of secretly loving Cameron, I was finally going to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But 3 days later, the ever-disciplined Professor Cameron took his own life. In the name of love. Chapter 2. I found Cameron lying in a pool of blood in his study. His eyes were closed, his expression calm. It was as if he were merely asleep. There was a deep, bone-revealing wound on his wrist. Blood trailed down from his wrist, staining the carpet a deep red. I pressed my hands against his wound, crying as I called for an ambulance. The doctor said Cameron still had a pulse and needed immediate emergency care. When they removed his blood-soaked shirt, they found an old necklace. The nurse handed the necklace to me, but I was completely puzzled, because the necklace didn't belong to me. Worse yet, that very night, photos of Cameron being rushed to the hospital, along with that necklace, were posted online by someone. One of the users recognized that the pattern on the necklace was very similar to the design on the ring Julia used to wear on her finger. The speculations from a few days ago resurfaced once again. The internet went wild. That night, no one cared about how shocked I was. Covered in blood, I was surrounded by reporters at the hospital entrance. The questions came one after another. Why did Professor Mu try to commit suicide? Was it because of Julia? Is that necklace a token of their love? My whole body was trembling, barely holding back the urge to break down as I replied. Tonight was just an accident. I am his fiancé. I hope everyone can stop mentioning irrelevant people. But the situation escalated, landing on the trending searches. The hashtag they say dying for love is just an old tale topped the trending list. Relentless investigations by netizens began to uncover more hidden clues. Cameron's shadow could be seen at nearly every one of Julia's performances. In public, there was never any inappropriate interaction between them. But Julia's earrings and Cameron's watch were from the same couple series. Even later, Some of Cameron's personal belongings would occasionally appear in Julia's photos. Sometimes it was in the morning, sometimes at night. This only further confirmed to the netizens that the two had once had a secret, passionate love affair. Overnight, fanfiction about them flooded the internet. Writers, with tender and delicate strokes, painted a romantic, wistful tale of their relationship, and I, cast as the villainous third wheel, was ruthlessly criticized by the internet. Cameron loved Julia all his life. Why should he marry Natalie? Family alliance. Obviously, even someone as brilliant as Professor Moo couldn't escape the fate of an arranged marriage. Are you kidding me? A famous dancer like Julia can't even step into the Moo family's door? Ridiculous. Natalie, are you happy now? This perfect world is just what you wanted. The hatred and insults from netizens were overwhelming. I sat blankly by Cameron's hospital bed, terrified and helpless. The few words I tried to use in my defense were soon drowned out by the waves of contempt. Now, I could only pray for Cameron to wake up soon. There were so many questions I needed him to answer. However, instead of Cameron's explanation, I received another bombshell of news. Julia, who was supposedly single, had a 5-year-old daughter. A daughter? Listening to the news broadcast, I felt a chill run down my spine and looked up in confusion. When I saw the photo, it felt like a hammer had struck me, leaving me dazed. The little girl's eyes were almost identical to Cameron's. In those brief moments, all the noise turned into a deafening buzz. I listened to the beeping of the hospital machines, slowly lowering my head in despair. Could she be Cameron's child? If she was, then what about our child? Chapter 3. A week after falling into a coma, Cameron finally woke up. He was calm. He explained the incident as an accident. But I, after days of torment, was exhausted both physically and mentally. Cameron, I need an explanation that I can believe. He looked at me with those beautiful eyes and softly said, I'm sorry for scaring you. That was all he would say. As for the gossip and rumors, they disappeared without a trace the day after he woke up. His explanation was, I will give my wife the dignity she deserves. That was the response I had waited for so many days to hear. In that moment, exhaustion washed over me. I clenched my clothes tightly. The report I had meant to show him turned into a crumpled piece of paper, lying deep in my pocket. I was pregnant. I hadn't had the chance to tell him yet. But at that moment, I suddenly felt that whether I told him or not wasn't so important anymore. Chapter 4. Cameron returned to his usual calm and considerate self. He put me first in everything. He gave me all the respect and dignity. My friends would always tease me. I saw your photo on Professor Moo's desk again today. The whole school knows you two are a perfect match. But I knew that wasn't the case. He's too polite to me, like I'm a stranger, except for that one time when he got drunk. That's called respecting you. Don't be ungrateful. You'll see once you're married. My friends said I had pre-wedding anxiety, and they all called to comfort me. Before one of them hung up, they suddenly remembered something, their tone filled with concern. Natalie, are you sick? I heard your Professor Moo took leave tonight to go to the hospital. I froze. No, I'm not sick. Just a few minutes ago, Cameron had texted me, working late tonight. How could he have taken leave? The other person mumbled in confusion. He left in a hurry. I thought it was because of you. For years, Cameron had been obsessed with his research, never once taking leave for anyone. I realized something was wrong. I pulled out the hospital address someone had sent me earlier and took a cab there. This was the hospital where Julia's daughter was being treated. At such a young age, she had kidney disease. She was surviving on dialysis. Cameron must have known about the child by now. I recalled the day not long after Cameron had woken up. Mrs. Moo had rushed over and had said something to him in private. Cameron's lips had curved into a faint smile. For the first time, his usually cold and aloof face showed a trace of emotion. It was from that day that he stopped being so withdrawn. After Mrs. Moo left, Cameron had suddenly held me and said, Natalie, from now on, let's live well together. I won't let anything happen again. You can rest assured. Chapter 5. The hospital room was eerily quiet at night. I hurried down the corridor, past door after door, drenched in cold sweat. As I passed by a few nurses, Fragments of their conversation floated into my ears. That was terrifying just now. Emma almost didn't make it. Poor Emma's mom. At least her husband came. A loud buzzing filled my head. Emma's mom, Julia, is still alive? Realizing what this meant, I rushed toward Emma's room. Rounding a corner, two intertwined figures came into view. The sight pierced through me like a dagger. I felt an unbearable pain, making it hard to breathe. Cameron had a petite woman pinned against the wall, holding her by the neck, kissing her fiercely and passionately. I had never seen Cameron so out of control. He didn't allow her any chance to resist. Chasing her lips, devouring them with intensity, the woman, with nowhere to escape, finally collapsed into his arms, sobbing, "Cameron, I can't fight the Move family. As long as Emma can live safely, I'm willing to give you up." A flush spread across the woman's pale face. In the dim light, I could finally make out her features. It was Julia. She was indeed alive. Cameron's eyes were filled with overwhelming love as he cupped Julia's face. His voice hoarse. "Why did you lie to me? Julia, did you want to see me die?" Julia's lips trembled like a frightened fawn. "It was Mrs. Moo who forced me." Cameron gently brushed aside her disheveled hair, comforting her. "It's going to be okay. I won't let you or Emma be in danger." Sensing something, Julia's eyes flashed with panic. "Cameron, what are you going to do?" Cameron's voice was filled with both despair and deep affection. "I agreed to marry that stranger. I'll become someone else's husband, just as the Move family wants, and I'll watch over you from afar, ensuring your safety for the rest of my life." Chapter 6. That night, I was rushed to the emergency room due to severe abdominal pain. In my dazed state, the words "that stranger" echoed in my mind like daggers, tearing me apart. Curled up on the bed, I clutched the ridiculous report tightly in my hands. The doctor stood by the bed, frowning as he looked at my test results. "Your condition is serious. Anemia, malnutrition, stomach issues, depression. You almost lost the baby. Where's the father? Give him a call. You both need to decide whether to keep the baby or not." Swallowing the nausea that surged through me, I closed my eyes and said, "There's no need. This baby has no father." In truth, this child was the result of an accident. One night, Cameron, who had always avoided alcohol, came home drunk. He pushed me against the doorway and kissed me, faced with the man I had loved for 10 years. I didn't resist. That one night had given me this child. Lying in the hospital bed, I impulsively opened Julia's social media. I found the date. It turned out that it was the same night her dance performance Farewell had trended online. In the years that followed, Farewell became a myth cherished by lovers everywhere. In her final message, Julia had written, "You are both my cure and my destination. Even if tomorrow we are worlds apart, I'll grow old with you." That must have been the night Cameron made his decision to let her go. They had said their goodbyes across the distance, through the small screens of their phones, and I had foolishly believed that Cameron had truly loved me that night. I pushed myself up from the bed, wiping away my tears in numbness. "Doctor, I don't want the baby anymore. Please schedule the surgery." Chapter 7. Due to my poor health, the doctor scheduled the surgery for half a month later. He instructed me to focus on getting better and not to worry too much. I decided to temporarily take a break from work. With this free time, I had enough space to think clearly about what I needed to do in the future. I was going to break off the engagement with Cameron, but not yet. My research project was in its final stage, and I still needed to collaborate with Cameron. The day I made my decision, I dragged my sick body to the Move family's house to feel things out. At the entrance, I overheard a conversation between Mrs. Moo and Cameron. "Cameron, have you forgotten what you promised Natalie's grandfather?" Cameron stood in the cold wind, his tone indifferent. "I remember. If I marry Natalie, the Moo family will inherit her grandfather's estate." Mrs. Moo frowned. "It's not just for the Moo family. It's for you too. Emma's illness costs 200,000 yuan a month, and this is just the beginning. With the Moo family's financial troubles, how will you support Emma?" Cameron curled his lips mockingly. "Do I have a choice? You used Julia's life to threaten me. What else do you want me to do?" You forced her to jump into the sea last time. What are you planning this time? Mom, you should know. If Julia dies, I won't live without her. Mrs. Moo was furious. Cameron's attitude was firm. Don't lie to me. You know my resolve. I didn't walk through the door. Instead, I quietly returned to my car. The cold white streetlights shone through the glass, spilling inside. I silently watched the bustling street, my fingernails digging into the soft leather of the steering wheel. My family and the Moo family had a long history together. When my grandfather passed away, I was too young to understand. From as far back as I could remember, Cameron had always been by my side. I liked him a lot. When others bullied him, I would secretly help him get back at them. When his father punished him by making him kneel through the night, I snuck into the kitchen to steal buns for him, burning myself badly enough to end up in the hospital for almost half a month. Over the years, such incidents were too numerous to count. Honestly, it didn't matter if he didn't respond to my feelings. I couldn't stop him from liking someone else. But then Cameron confessed to me. I thought he had finally seen my worth. I never imagined that everything had already been given a price tag. By the time I snapped out of my thoughts, I realized my face was covered in tears. For the first time in 10 years, I called my grandfather's lawyer. Why does my grandfather's estate pass to the Moo family if I get married? After a brief pause, he said, Mr. Sure established a trust fund before his death. If Cameron marries you, the Moo family will inherit that estate. What if I don't get married? Then it will go directly to you. However, most of the Sure family's shareholders have already sided with the Moo family. Gaining control would still be difficult. In other words, the engagement had to remain in place for now, at least until I had the power to clean house. Chapter 8. I began to force myself to eat. Even though my stomach churned and I vomited until there was nothing left but bile, I made sure to keep up my nutrition. I'm not a strong person, and this process was excruciating. I often found myself curled up under the covers late at night, biting down, forcing myself to face the uncertain road ahead. I had to get better. Only by surviving could I fight back. One evening, Cameron came home. He brought a bouquet of flowers, the usual arrangement from the flower shop at the entrance of the complex. He glanced at the bowl of instant noodles in front of me and frowned. You're eating this when I'm not home? Where's the housekeeper? She took the day off. Cameron was silent for a moment before picking up an apron. Wait outside. Dinner will be ready soon. The faint scent of jasmine perfume hung in the air. I never used jasmine perfume. It was coming from his clothes. I pulled out a chair and sat at the dining table, speaking toward the kitchen. I haven't been feeling well lately. Let's postpone the wedding. Cameron's eyelashes fluttered slightly, and he replied, There's no precedent for postponing a wedding in the Moo family. If you're unwell, I can take you to the hospital. I looked at the man busily cooking in the kitchen and forced a bitter smile. So, it was possible to pretend to love someone. Cameron was willing to pretend for a lifetime, just to save Julia. When he came home, he would bring me my favorite shredded chicken. After dinner, he would sit with me and watch my favorite movies. When he got tipsy, he would affectionately lean over and ask for a kiss. He acted like the perfect, loving husband. But as I stared at Cameron's face, the hatred inside me grew stronger with each passing day. Many times, I had to resist the urge to slap him and tell him to go to hell. The wedding day was fast approaching. Breaking off the engagement was becoming urgent. My main job was as a lecturer at the same university where Cameron worked. We worked together in the same lab, and we made a good team when it came to research. But when it came to running a company, I was clueless. Taking control of the company seemed like an insurmountable challenge. The process of learning the ropes nearly drained me of all my mental energy. Grandfather's associates always shook their heads, saying, Miss Natalie, you truly have no talent for business. It's laughable, isn't it? I was like the useless supporting character in a romance novel, unable to build a business empire overnight. I had to face the reality that reclaiming the company, which the Moo family had slowly eroded, would require a costly, painstaking battle. To that end, I accompanied Cameron to visit the Moo family a few times. In our conversations, I subtly expressed my eagerness for the wedding. This gave the Moo family great confidence. believing that my grandfather's inheritance would soon be theirs. At the end of the month, the Move family made a bold gamble, expanding their business and seizing opportunities. The news of Cameron's and my impending wedding became one of the most talked about events of the year. Just when I thought everything was moving smoothly, Julia came knocking, ignoring all of Cameron's efforts to protect her. She appeared in front of me, smiling as she extended her hand. "Nice to meet you, Natalie. I'm Cameron's wife. I had just undergone the abortion, my body drenched in cold sweat." Julia fearlessly blocked me in the freezing wind, formally declaring war. I pulled my coat tighter, speaking coldly, "Sorry, I didn't know that in your world, mistresses are called wives." Julia's smile froze. "Natalie, why are you deceiving yourself? I've already had his child. I bet Cameron doesn't even want to touch you." She raised her head arrogantly. "I allow your presence. I allow Cameron to come visit you from time to time. You should be thanking me." My patience snapped, and I grabbed her hair, pressing her head against the car window. I sneered. "Is your pee matte? Open your eyes, dog. What right do you have to make demands?" Julia was stunned, screaming, "How dare you touch me?" My knuckles turned white as I clenched my fist. "Are you tired of living?" Julia froze, motionless. I leaned in close and whispered into her ear, "It's not that I allow Cameron to stay by my side. It's that you have no choice but to endure it as long as I want it. Cameron will never see you again. Understand?" Julia's face went pale. "Natalie, how dare you?" I kicked her hard, storming back into the car. My whole body was trembling from what had just happened. For the first time in over 20 years, I had finally stood my ground, and it felt good. Chapter 9. I wasn't afraid of Julia telling Cameron what happened, because in front of Cameron, she always played the role of the delicate, innocent girl. She loved Cameron too much to dare let him know she had provoked me first. As for me, this was a critical time in my career. As I was about to be promoted to associate professor, I had planned to rest and recover before returning to work. I didn't intend to get tangled up with Julia any further. A few days later, I received a call from the lab. Cameron's graduate student was crying as she asked me, "Professor, when will you be back? It looks like someone destroyed our data." Hearing the news, I rushed to the lab. On that cold winter day, the fluorescent lights in the hallway flickered, and the sound of students whispering filled the air. When I opened the door, I saw several students gathered around the computers, their eyes red from crying. "Professor, someone tampered with your computer too." The scent of jasmine, which didn't belong in the lab, lingered in the air. Cameron walked over, surrounded by students, and asked softly, "What happened?" There were still traces of spilled milk tea on the lab's computers. The place was a mess. A student explained to Cameron, "Someone came looking for you earlier and spilled milk tea all over the desk. It's not just the data. Our samples are ruined too." Eating and drinking were strictly prohibited in the lab. The only person who would dare do something like this had to be an outsider. At that moment, a soft, feminine voice suddenly came from the doorway, accompanied by light panting. "Sorry, Natalie. I accidentally knocked over the milk tea earlier. I went to get some tissues for you. Here, wipe it up." A flicker of panic crossed Cameron's eyes. He probably hadn't expected Julia to show up unannounced in front of me. "What are you doing here?" Julia's cheeks were flushed. "We've known each other for so many years. Can't I come by to catch up?" Seeing Julia's flushed, excited face, I suddenly walked over to her. Julia looked regretful. "I'm so sorry. I accidentally ruined Natalie's things. I didn't mean to." Slap. A sharp slap landed hard on Julia's face. She was completely stunned. "You don't think you can just apologize and make this go away after destroying such important experimental data, do you? You wasted $2 million in research funding with one careless spill. Do you have any idea that because of you, these students might not graduate? Not to mention, years of my work were in there too." The sudden turn of events left the lab in dead silence. Julia held her face, her eyes quickly filling with tears. "Natalie, no matter what, hitting someone is wrong." I raised my hand again. "I should hit you harder." Cameron grabbed my arm. his tone calm. Natalie, don't make this difficult for her. I turned to face him, meeting his cold gaze. In that moment, I realized the facade of peace could no longer be maintained. Cameron, are you admitting it then? His response was firm. I'll compensate you for this. That day, under Cameron's determined protection, Julia wasn't punished at all. Using his connections, Cameron unilaterally covered up the incident. To clean up after Julia, he even spent $2 million of his own money to make up for the loss. The students, though angry, were too afraid to say anything, and spent their days sulking in silence. Meanwhile, Cameron and I completely fell into a cold war. One afternoon, while helping students with their research topics, someone suddenly ran up to me and said, "Professor, someone posted a video of you online." I pulled out my phone and opened social media. Right on the homepage, I saw the headline, "Natalie is evil." The video captured the exact moment I slapped Julia. From a sharp angle, the internet exploded. "Aw, Julia's still alive. Was Julia being coerced? Who does Natalie think she is? Slapping someone like that? She's stealing someone's husband and acting all righteous about it. If it were me, I'd slap back. Ugh, Professor Moo. Save Julia. I can't bear to see her suffer anymore." The comments multiplied every second. The number of people hurling insults at me grew exponentially. I had become the story's villain. No one cared that 3 years of research had been destroyed. No one cared how many students had their graduation delayed, or how many might never graduate at all. They only wanted to see their fantasy couple, Julia and Cameron, get the happy ending straight out of a novel. Chapter 10. The situation with Julia eventually caught the attention of the Moo family. The day after the incident, Mrs. Moo called Cameron and me to the house for dinner. Right in front of me, she scolded Cameron. "I threw away all that person's stuff you were keeping." This was to show where the Moo family stood on the matter. Cameron paused, then said with lowered eyes, "Understood." During dinner, Mrs. Moo was patient with me, even agreeing without hesitation when I suggested postponing the wedding. I couldn't stand the suffocating atmosphere any longer and stepped outside. The moonlight was cold and desolate. As I stood outside, I noticed a servant carrying a box, accidentally spilling its contents on the ground. Several small items rolled to my feet. The servant rushed over in a panic. "I'm sorry, Natalie. These are things Madam wanted to throw away." I gently stepped on a familiar green feather and asked, "Cameron's?" "Yes. Miss Jean gave them to Mr. Moo." A gust of cold wind blew as I slowly bent down to pick up the small items. A soft, familiar feather. It was something I had once treasured for a long time. Inside the box were a few autumn pear candies, a small keychain, and a clumsy and signed love letter. "These, Julia gave these to him?" Yes. Seeing the fear in their eyes, I suddenly burst into laughter. Tears streamed down my face as I laughed. These were Julia's? All because of my own cowardice. The things I had secretly given to Cameron back then had somehow ended up credited to Julia. These things were mine. At some point, Cameron had come outside. "Don't throw those away. Put them in my car." The servant hurriedly gathered the items and left. Staring into the dark night, I suddenly said, "Cameron, spend my birthday with me." The wind tugged at his thick wool coat, shadows dancing across his sharp, chiseled face, his expression unreadable. "Natalie, is this really necessary?" He wasn't even pretending anymore. The disgust in his eyes was plain to see. I smiled. "Yes, Cameron, I've loved you for 10 years. Done so much for you. Don't you think you owe me at least a birthday?" Cameron frowned slightly. "Fine." Chapter 11. On my birthday, Cameron drove me to the observatory in the suburbs to look at the stars. They say that couples who make a wish under the stars will end up together. I had wished and hoped for this day for years. But standing next to Cameron now, staring up at the starry sky, I suddenly realized it wasn't as beautiful as I imagined. It was actually kind of cold. But seeing Cameron so uncomfortable made me feel good. After stumbling through so much suffering over the years, what did this little bit of his discomfort matter? I took a photo and posted it to my social media. At 10 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a picture from Julia. She was nestled in Cameron's arms, wearing a thin camisole, her face flushed. Judging by Cameron's outfit, it was from the night he had gone out for a conference and hadn't come home. Natalie, he's been mine for a long time. Even if you marry him, you'll just be taking care of him for me. Emma won't be our last child. Want to make a bet? I glanced over at Cameron, who was holding a telescope, trying to find Vega for me. I replied, "Are you sure? Cameron is right next to me. Guess what he's doing?" Julia disappeared for a few minutes, then came back to confront me. Why isn't Cameron answering my calls? Of course, it was because his phone was left in the car. Julia panicked, sending increasingly provocative messages. Emma's looking for her dad. Could you let him know to come back? I pretended not to see. Julia quickly sent another message. Natalie, I advise you not to be so malicious. If you dare hide this from him, just wait for your downfall. Emma is his heart and soul. He won't forgive you. I turned off my phone and tugged on Cameron's sleeve. Cameron, I don't want to see Vega anymore. Let's find something else. And while we're at it, look for the other constellations too, one by one. By the time we returned to the car, it was nearly midnight. When Cameron turned on his phone, he saw a string of missed calls. His expression changed instantly. Right in front of me, he dialed back, his voice betraying his anxiety. Julia, what happened? Julia's sobs came through the phone. This time, she changed her tone. Cameron, I don't know what to do. I'm sorry. Emma is sick. I messaged Natalie 2 hours ago, but she didn't tell you. Emma's in serious condition. Can you come now? For the first time, I saw clear emotional turmoil on Professor Mu's usually composed face. His dark eyes locked onto mine, sharp and accusing. Natalie, get out of the car. I smiled. It's 1:30 a.m. And you're going to leave me stranded in the middle of nowhere? Get out. Don't make me say it twice. Cameron said nothing more, opened the car door, and ordered me out, driving away without another word. I stood there in the cold wind, watching the car's taillights fade into the distance. As expected, Julia's message soon followed, laced with a smug satisfaction. Did he kick you out of the car? Remember this, don't think too highly of yourself. I made a phone call. Half a minute later, a black car pulled up in front of me. Lawyer, he lowered the window. Natalie, get in. I sent Lawyer he the chat logs between Julia and me, saving them for future use. On the way back, I received a text from Cameron. Don't involve the child in our issues. I don't want this to happen again. Without emotion, I typed out my response. Look through your little keepsakes carefully. Inside the capsule toys leaf, you'll find a ring I hid. The last line of the love letter is from my grandfather's journal. I hope you'll stop touching them and return them to me, okay? After sending the message, I turned off my phone. I headed straight to the new apartment I had recently purchased. Lawyer, he said, Natalie, soon you'll be able to break off the engagement. But this time, our family might suffer significant losses. I know, cutting off a limb to save the body. In the following days, I helped Cameron's students come up with new research topics. I applied for scholarships for those from financially disadvantaged backgrounds. Over the years, I had saved up enough to support a few of the students through graduation, and I planned to have them transferred under my name once I was promoted to associate professor. After all, Cameron was becoming less and less attentive to them. The students' futures shouldn't be sacrificed for the sake of their love drama. Chapter 12. When I turned my phone back on the next day, I saw numerous missed calls. There were also messages from friends. Your Professor Mu is going crazy looking for you. Where on earth are you? At that moment, I was sitting in a taxi on my way to the hospital. I had been working so hard lately that I had caught a bad cold, and my health wasn't improving. While waiting for my appointment, I scrolled through my phone and saw that today was Julia's birthday. Flowers stretched from the entrance hall all the way to the lawn outside. The birthday party was grand and extravagant. There were fans praising her, strangers admiring her, and flashing cameras everywhere. Julia looked like a goddess who had descended to earth, delicate and enchanting. But today, there was something off about her. Her eyes were distant, her expression filled with longing. The netizens started asking, has anyone seen Professor Mu? Today is Julia's big day. No sign of him. I thought Professor Mu had a fiancé. Don't mention Natalie. She's just an obstacle standing in the way. How unlucky. Natalie. Make sure to follow up with your treatment and take your medication on time. The doctor's words snapped me back to reality. I nodded. Thank you. As I walked out with my prescription, I suddenly bumped into someone. He smelled of the cold wind, his voice low and hoarse. Natalie, where have you been? I looked up into Cameron's face and instinctively took a step back. Judging by his appearance, he had been looking for me all night. Don't touch me. I don't want anything to do with you right now. Cameron suddenly grabbed my wrist. His eyes red. Natalie, why didn't you tell me sooner? I pushed him away harshly and threw the ultrasound report I had been holding in his face. Cameron, do you think this is a game? Whoever gives you a gift, you fall for them. How low can you go? Cameron froze, staring at the final line on the report. His eyes clouded with confusion. This is our child. He stood there, stunned, carefully running his fingers over the photo, his voice faltering. Natalie, we had a child. Not anymore. I cut him off, my face emotionless. I was planning to surprise you, but the day you and Julia were fooling around in the hospital, I aborted it. Cameron's face turned deathly pale. I smiled, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the wall. Do you have any idea how much it hurts to lose a child? So, get lost, okay? Cameron seemed to deflate all at once, his energy drained. I handed him some paperwork. I forgot to tell you. I just got promoted to associate professor. If you don't mind, I'd like you to transfer a few of your students to me. Think it over. I'll be home tonight. Without waiting for a response, I got into the car and left. Given the current state of the Mu family's business, if I annul the engagement, the Mu family will immediately fall apart. But I have one last thing to take care of. I need to secure Cameron's students. That night, Cameron stood outside for a long time. I watched from the window as the cigarette in his hand burned down, then flared up again, but he didn't move. It seemed like he was making a heavy decision. When Cameron finally came back inside, he was frozen to the bone. He pulled me, sitting at the dining table, into his arms, holding me tightly. Natalie, I'll agree to everything you want, but you can't leave me. Chapter 13. I had forgotten that Cameron once tried to commit suicide for Julia, and he was also willing to do anything to stay with me. He refused to sign the student transfer forms. That night, I went to some trouble to get him drunk and forced him to sign his name. Cameron slumped on the couch, mumbling in his sleep. Natalie, I'll treat you well from now on. No one will ever bully you. How affectionate. If I were the old Natalie, I might have laughed out loud with happiness. But now, I just wanted to get as far away from this miserable life as possible. Holding the signed forms, I left in the middle of the night. The next day, the Mu family received the termination letter. On the day Cameron and I were supposed to register our marriage, I disappeared without a trace. Cameron called me. Natalie, where are you? The other end of the line was quiet. I could only hear Cameron's faint breathing as I ran my fingers over the inheritance papers. I said, Cameron, I've thought it through. I don't want to make things work with you. Let's end it here. After a brief moment of stunned silence, Cameron started to panic. Natalie, where are you? Tell me. I'll come find you. I turned off my phone and, with lawyer Heed by my side, signed the documents to inherit the estate. From that day on, my grandfather's company and all his assets belonged to me. Of course, because I had purged some unreliable employees and severed ties with the Mu family, the company faced significant financial losses. My grandfather's associates could only sigh helplessly. Natalie, from today onward, you'll need to give your all to keep the company afloat. At 28 years old, I seemed to have broken free from some kind of shackle, embracing a difficult yet ordinary life that was truly my own. As lawyer, he escorted me to the door. He shook my hand. Natalie, I wish you a bright future. I felt a lump in my throat but smiled. Thank you. Without the Mu family's strong financial support, it didn't take long for them to drown in debt. They became more low-key in their actions, careful not to attract any attention from their rivals. Cameron had changed a lot. He was no longer the calm, dignified Professor Mu. He seemed ill, frequently missing his classes. One day, Cameron suddenly stopped me. "Natalie, you've lost weight." I had recently recovered from a severe cold and mild depression, hardly something that would heal in just one winter. I took a deep breath. "Thanks to you, Professor Mu. That little love affair of ours almost cost me my life. I'm grateful that we've finally reached the end." Cameron's face twisted in pain. "Natalie, you can't be this cruel." I looked at him, emotionless, and reminded him, "You have a child now. Show some decency. Emma is innocent." That evening, I received a call from Julia. "What did you say to Cameron? Why isn't he talking to me?" I calmly asked. "Ms. Jean, does it feel good to steal someone else's credit?" Julia paused, her tone wary. "What are you talking about? I was hospitalized for burns back then, wasn't I? And you took the credit for everything. Should I remind you?" Without waiting for her reply, I coldly added, "If you ever dare call me again, I'll bring reporters to your doorstep and discuss this in person." That warning kept Julia in check for quite a while. After New Year's, a photo suddenly went viral on social media. In the picture, Cameron was at the observatory, pressing Julia against the railing, kissing her passionately. The bright moonlight, the romantic atmosphere, it all seemed like a scene out of a movie. And the photo shot to the top of the trending list. Fans were thrilled, finally breathing a sigh of relief. Natalie is finally gone. Is this their official announcement? I'm all for it. They need to live in my phone forever. After years apart, these two star-crossed lovers had finally reunited. Adding a bit of joy to the end of the year, the topic dominated the trending lists for several days. "I really don't get what's going on in Professor Mu's head." One of the students let out a frustrated sigh. "Julia clearly has bad intentions." Well, at least we're not the ones suffering. As the year drew to a close, I moved into a new place and invited my students over for dinner. The students, who had looked so downcast months ago, were now glowing inside and out. "Professor Natalie, thank you for everything you've done for us. With your help, I feel like I can keep going for a few more years." "Hey, don't you want to graduate? Our professor sure has to keep working hard. I want to do my PhD under you." Steam rose from the hot pot, filling the air with warmth. I sat in the soft light, watching the lively scene around me, my eyes stinging a bit. This was probably the most festive little New Year I had had since my grandfather passed away. In previous years, Cameron was always either working late or traveling. Now that I had taken over that position myself, I realized that, in fact, the school didn't require you to work on holidays like this. It had just been an excuse. This year, with the heavy snowfall making travel difficult, a few students stayed over at my place. After Little New Year, my house became lively and bustling. In the midst of it all, Julia couldn't hold back any longer and sent me another message. "Natalie, thank you for giving him back to me. I've been thinking a lot, and I realize he might not love me because of what happened in the past. So, there's no need for you to be so aggressive." Casually munching on an apple, I replied, "Oh, I'll go give Professor Mu a call then. You're such a piece of trash, aren't you?" I chuckled. "Not as much as you." Chapter 14. Cameron and Julia's first big argument happened at the end of February. Julia had persuaded Emma to throw away Cameron's hard drive. This caused an irreparable flaw in Cameron's experiment that year. He was publicly reprimanded by the entire department. He even lost his right to admit new students. Emma, after causing the disaster, timidly said, "It had Aunt Natalie's name on it. Mommy said everything that belongs to her should be burned." After enduring 2 disasters, the students couldn't hold back anymore. They exposed the video and wrote a collective letter, requesting that Cameron be stripped of his professorship. Fans who had once been obsessed with the Mu-Jean couple were suddenly hit by the furious university students. "Stop calling her a goddess. Julia is an idiot. 6 months ago, she ruined Natalie's research samples, and now she's teaching a child to destroy data. How did her parents not give her half a brain?" And it's not the first time. Someone posted the report from 6 months ago. Under the post, the top-liked comments were still insults directed at me. One person bitterly complained, "I commented last time. saying Julia had issues. But no one listened. They all went after Natalie. Did they think us grad students don't use the internet? A bunch of love-obsessed idiots. Wow. So it was Natalie's experiment she destroyed last time. That slap was well-deserved. Why didn't Natalie say anything back then? Or the other students? Finally, one of the students couldn't stay silent anymore. Professor Moo covered it all up. We wanted to report it, but Professor Natalie wouldn't let us. She preferred to endure online abuse herself. In academia, unless you're desperate, no one reports their own mentor. I didn't want to drag these students, who were passionate about their research, into a public storm. They shouldn't risk their future for a small chance at justice. Under the weight of the online backlash, Julia quickly crumbled. That day, I sat in my office, witnessing the argument between Cameron and Julia. Julia cried dramatically. Emma is your daughter. She just doesn't want you to have any ties with Natalie. What's so wrong about that? Cameron replied coldly. What does this have to do with Natalie? That was my data. See? People only feel pain when the fire burns them. He could casually use $2 million to cover the loss of my research. But when it came to his own work, he couldn't bear it being ruined. That hard drive was one I had given Cameron many years ago. My name was engraved on it. For all these years, Cameron had stored his data there. It wasn't something that could be easily replaced. But Julia didn't understand that. Their fight ended in bitterness. As Julia left, she shot me a resentful glare, her words full of provocation. No matter what Emma and I do, Cameron will always forgive me. So don't get too comfortable. I looked up from the student's thesis and said, MS. Jean, have you been struggling financially lately? I noticed you haven't changed your bag in a while. Running out of money? That comment struck a nerve in Julia's fragile pride. Julia's dramatic cliff jump had been staged to ruin my engagement. On the surface, it seemed like she was coerced by the Moo family. But in reality, she had planned her fake death to disrupt my engagement. However, there had been a small accident during her jump, and she injured her leg, leaving her with severe long-term damage. It ended her dancing career. With the Moo family now in financial ruins, Cameron's income was nowhere near enough to support her extravagant lifestyle. A few days later, news broke that Julia was planning a comeback. The day Cameron made a phone call, his voice echoed through the hallway. Can you stop this nonsense? There's no chance your leg will recover. Isn't it better to stay home and take care of Emma? Why do you always have to compete with Natalie? Julia's voice suddenly rose in agitation. Cameron, are you disgusted by my disability? If you dare go back to Natalie, I'll kill myself. Cameron hung up the phone, only to find me standing at the door. I smiled politely. I'm here to pick up some student files. His students had all been transferred to me now. I had plenty to keep me busy. A flicker of pain crossed Cameron's face. Thank you for all your hard work. I picked up the files and turned to leave. As I reached the door, Cameron suddenly called out, Natalie. I turned back, looking at him in confusion. Cameron's expression was complex. I have cancer. I don't think I have much time left. I nodded indifferently. I'm a little tight on money right now, so I can't lend you any. Sorry. Before leaving, I paused, feeling that my response had been a bit cold, and added, maybe you should ask someone else? Seeing Cameron's pale face, I nodded. Or, on second thought, I wish you a speedy recovery. Chapter 15. Julia's dance program had been heavily promoted, so when she slipped and fell during a performance, the whole incident quickly became the talk of the town. Julia's legs were now completely ruined. She would never set foot on the stage again. After that, Julia's mental state visibly deteriorated. At the end of March, her famous dance piece, Farewell, was exposed as plagiarized. An art school applicant who had been overlooked years ago posted her competition piece. It was almost identical to Julia's Farewell, but the student's work predated Julia's by several months. Back then, MS. Jean was one of the judges. My teacher said I was going to do really well, but on the same day, I got the rejection letter. After all these years, I've finally worked up the courage to ask MS. Jean, how can you live with yourself after stealing someone else's work? The revelation sparked public outrage. Criticism of Julia came in waves. First, Cameron lets his wife and daughter destroy research data. Now, Julia plagiarizes a student's work. Do these two even care about the future of young people in this country? How can students thrive with people like this in power? Any of Professor Moo's students want to speak up? Don't insult us. Thanks. We've already switched advisors. Our new mentor is Professor Natalie. She not only used her own money to support us, but she also helped us with research topics and guided us toward graduation. By the way, Professor sure struggled with depression because of Cameron's cheating. She was bedridden for months, yet still worked while sick. The screenshots lawyer he had collected for me finally came in handy. As Julia's provocative comments came to light, people began to realize the truth. Wow, there was a time when the Moo Jean ship was everywhere, and everyone said Natalie was a homewrecker. But she was the fiancé. Some of you probably don't know that the Schur family had been in decline for years. Natalie couldn't force Cameron to marry her unless he wanted to. So, the Moo family didn't like Julia and let Cameron ruin Natalie's life? And Cameron had a daughter with Julia while hiding it from Natalie? That's disgusting. The public backlash grew fiercer by the day. Julia finally panicked. No matter how hard she tried to defend herself, people kept slamming her. The cruel words once hurled at me were now being directed at her. I made a call to the company. The voice on the other end said, "Don't worry. The money has been sent to that art school student. She wanted me to thank you for seeking justice on her behalf." Natalie, do you want to keep pushing the trending topics? I thought about it for a moment. No, leave the rest of the money for that student. Let her live well. Outside, all the leaves had fallen. The rusty sound of the tree cutter screeched through the white winter sky. Cameron had moved out of the lab. All the awards he had once hung on the walls were gone. Now, all that remained was a blank white wall. Soon, it would have my name on it. I returned all the gifts Cameron had given me. Among them was a bracelet he had given me when I first joined the lab. As he touched the now dull diamond, he murmured, "Natalie, maybe I was wrong. She's not who I thought she was." I stood there, saying nothing. Cameron lowered his head, bitterness spilling from his lips. How did she become like this? Greedy, malicious, and unrepentant. Natalie, if I had chosen to stay with you, Cameron, did you ever ask what I wanted? I interrupted him. Cameron froze. I don't want to be someone's second choice. Why should I be your fallback when you realize the road you chose is too hard? The truth is, Cameron, the greedy and malicious one is you. Natalie, we should go. Someone called out lazily from across the street. Cameron looked up, startled, and saw a man leaning against the car door not far away. He wore a double-breasted wool coat, standing casually in the wind. The look in his eyes as he glanced at me held a hint of amusement. I nodded. Don't tell me about your problems again. Cameron, I have a boyfriend now. The wind howled. Cameron's long overdue confession drifted from behind me. Natalie, I love you. I paused in my step, laughing softly. Do you think your love is something precious? I no longer had the heart to speak with him and walked around the car to get in. Kevin closed the door for me and casually greeted Cameron. Then, we drove away. Chapter 16. On the way back, I said, "Thanks to Mr. Wu for playing along." Kevin drove, casually chatting with me, then just settle the performance fee or treat me to a meal. In truth, Kevin's life was much worse than mine. His family had fallen on hard times, and he owed millions from a failed business venture, only managing to pay it off earlier this year. Recently, he had just started earning again and had bought a house and a car. At least I had some recognition in academia. I had taken on a few new students, though they weren't exactly low maintenance. My company went through ups and downs, but I managed to keep it afloat. All these years later, my business acumen was still as terrible as it had always been. Yet, as I gazed out the window at the colorful neon lights, I felt an odd sense of peace, as if I had finally found my place in the world. Just as Kevin often said, maybe we were all just NPCs in the grand scheme. Even ordinary NPCs could live happily. Half a year passed in the blink of an eye. Several of my students completed their research and were set to graduate smoothly. On the day of autumn's arrival, Kevin and a few students organized a grand banquet in the mountains to celebrate me as their mentor. They even sent out invitations to close friends. It was on that morning that Julia stormed into the banquet, carrying a can of gasoline. The pungent smell of gas filled the air as she wildly sprayed it around. "It's all your fault. You took everything from me." Her expression was deranged, and the hatred in her eyes as she looked at me was palpable. "Ha ha ha, Natalie. How dare you live a happier life than me? You should die." Julia's legs had been ruined, and she limped as she walked. The gasoline splashed everywhere, nearly destroying half the venue. At this point, Cameron was already suffering from cancer. Julia was buried in debt, and Emma had developed a spoiled and difficult temperament. She often fought with Julia, asking why she hadn't just stayed dead. If Julia had died, I would have been Emma's stepmother, and all my wealth would have gone to Emma. On top of Cameron's neglect, Julia had lost her mind. By the time Cameron rushed in, the lighter had already sparked the gasoline. The flames spread rapidly, engulfing everything in seconds. Guests scattered in all directions. The fire roared like a furious wave, devouring everything in its path. Kevin reacted quickly, pulling me into a corner the moment Julia entered. I watched as Julia was consumed by the flames. Cameron stood in the middle of the hall, his clothes soaked in gasoline, staring at me with a resolute look in his eyes. At that moment, it was hard to distinguish whether the emotion in his eyes was pain or regret. Julia clung to his clothes, hugging him from behind. The flames easily climbed up. The face I had once longed for disappeared into the raging fire. Kevin dragged me out through the side door. His grip was strong, and he was trembling. The moment we stepped outside, he pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly. "Are you hurt anywhere?" I looked into his vulnerable eyes, surprised, and only then realized he was scared. I shook my head. "No. Thanks to quick action, none of the guests were injured. A small section of my hair had been singed, but it wasn't a big deal." Kevin held me tightly. "Thank goodness." For a moment, I thought that dream was coming true. Dream? I once dreamed that you and Cameron got married. Everyone around you was scheming against you, Moo family. Julia, Emma. When you died in the fire, you were 28. Just like now. I gazed at the sky, which was still being swallowed by flames. That sounds like a nightmare. Luckily, it was just a dream. Apart from Cameron and Julia dying in the fire, no one else was hurt. After their obituaries were published, the truth about Cameron and Julia's past was finally revealed to the world. Netizens sarcastically commented, "You'd think this was some kind of high society drama. Seriously, two people separated by class, unable to love each other freely." Julia's life was used as a bargaining chip, forcing Cameron into an arranged marriage. At one point, Cameron really tried to live a good life with Natalie, but the day Julia tried to kill herself, he slit his wrists. So romantic. Oh, by the way, can these two idiots stop ruining Natalie's life? Natalie must have been cursed to become a pawn in their game. The world finally made sense again. Later in autumn, Kevin and I visited the cemetery in the mountains. The cold wind rustled through the dried grass, creating a soft, sweeping sound. Among the rows of tombstones, Cameron's and Julia's graves were side by side. Kevin said, "Emma died from her illness. What a tragedy. If you won't take care of a child, why bring her into this world?" I placed a bouquet in front of their graves and tossed a voice recorder and an old phone into the fire pit. The wind fanned the flames, making the burning parts crackle loudly. Kevin asked, "What's that?" A recording of Cameron calling Julia selfish and cruel, and the phone I used to contact Julia. That night, Cameron had opened up to me, and I had sent the audio directly to Julia. It had only made her lash out at me even more viciously. My mere existence had become a thorn in her side. Seeing Kevin's thoughtful gaze, I said seriously, "I agree with you. Maybe we were all just supporting characters. What happened in your dream probably should have been my ending." After all, the hatred from the internet toward me was so illogical. It bordered on absurdity. It was as if the whole world expected everyone to sacrifice for the reunion of Cameron and Julia. The fire blazed higher. The plastic parts crackled in the flames. I crouched down to extinguish the burned-out ashes. To survive a story that wasn't written for me, the only way is to kill the protagonist. Kevin finished for me. The wind quietly swirled between us. I smiled. I had cut off the Move family's foundation. I had shaken Julia's trust in Cameron. I had let their arguments escalate until they eventually destroyed each other. At this point, even the author will give up on them, and ordinary people will get to live well. I poured a drink in front of their graves. The wind picked up, and Kevin draped a coat over my shoulders. Let's go home. He and I walked side by side down the rugged mountain path. I've always wondered, what's your role in all this? Kevin glanced at me. Maybe I'm just the poor extra who's loved the supporting character for years, but can never have her, and ends up cleaning up her mess in the end. I paused, feeling something stir in my memory, but I couldn't quite grasp it. Kevin smiled. Don't worry. Extras aren't meant to be remembered. The author didn't write that. The wind rustled through the trees. The dried leaves created a pleasant, rustling symphony. Kevin's voice drifted in and out with the breeze. Natalie, I'm just glad you're still alive. Who knows? Maybe somewhere, in a place we can't see, you've become the protagonist of someone's story. I chuckled. Then I hope they'll kindly end the story here. From now on, I want to walk the road ahead as an ordinary person. Kevin's soft laugh carried away with the wind. If they're listening, I bet they'll oblige.